Hello world, it's Lee Kelson coming to you live from our Gold Coast studio here in Australia for FireTech Connect. My guest today is an expert in creating innovation ecosystems and driving economic development. He's one of the world's leading speakers on the subject of economic development relating to innovation ecosystems, and has spoken in Brazil, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, to name a few. And more importantly, he was also the founding CEO of the world's leading cleantech accelerator, Los Angeles Cleantech Incubator, otherwise known as LACI. As I mentioned, it's the world's leading clean technology innovation center. He's now the CEO of the Network of Global Innovation, NGIN, I hope that's right, Engine, and works with governments and organisations around the world, including the US, Ukraine, Thailand, Ethiopia, Morocco, to name a few. He was named Tech Week 100 as one of the most impactful technology leaders, and we're joined today by Fred Walti. Fred, welcome to FireTech Connect.
It's terrific to see you, Lee. Good morning for you, afternoon for me. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, of course.
I can see you. We just mentioned you've got a very nice little background there. It looks very retro.
Yeah, it's kind of eclectic, kind of like my life, right? I like the combination of retro and future.
Right.
Good thing.
So I mean, we were just talking offline about the obviously the thing that's on everybody's mind at the moment is the coronavirus and COVID-19, and from I suppose an outside perspective looking into the US, looks like fairly challenging times, perhaps a lack of coordination, a lack of leadership. What's the view on the ground there in Los Angeles?
Well, within the broad scopes of things, I think Los Angeles benefits from a real leader. I think our mayor, Eric Garcetti, is actually leading for the city, just like Cuomo is doing in New York, and our governor is Newsom is doing a really good job. So it's good to start out with knowing the facts. So that's a really important thing. I think that most people are unsure of the future, as they should be, of course. Governor Newsom was on the TV this morning, and he said that 3 months ago, literally 3 months ago, the state's budget had an $8 billion surplus. 3 months later, it's got a $13 billion deficit. So that's the kind of impact that's happening. Certainly in Los Angeles and the rest of the United States. We took for the first time, my wife and I actually got out of, we live in a converted fish factory in downtown LA. It's in a loft, and we're in the commercial district, and so it's kind of muscular down here. So we don't get out that much, but we got out today and we went through the west side of Los Angeles, and it looks pretty closed up. It's so you can see it, and even though the president says 70% of the state is open, or the governor says 70%, didn't look like it to me. And as
so I think I think that's an interesting point. It's all very well one thing to open an economy, but I think some of the numbers I saw that it was around 76% of Americans were feeling that they weren't confident to go about their normal life. So you can open the shops, but people have got to be comfortable and confident.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And I think that part of that is leadership, right? If you think your leaders have it together and are making good decisions, you're more confident. So I think we're in pretty good shape in California, from that respect. And you really understand what it is to live in California versus the rest of the country, and just from a power politics point of view, we have 40 million people. We have some muscle in the market, and there are a lot of states, however, that don't, that have a real hard time getting attention and so forth. So it's not an equal world.
It is not, and I think it is exposing, this virus has exposed that divide not only in the US but I think across the world.
Well, before COVID-19 came out, for the first time in my life, for the majority of my life, I've been a glass is half full kind of guy. I see opportunity where there's risk and so forth. And for the first time in my life, I had kind of moved to the glass is half empty point of view, because I see a number of really significant changes coming at us. And the most important one is automation and the impact of automation on middle-class jobs and working-class jobs. And there've been a lot of studies done recently that show that, in parts of Southern California, 60% of all jobs are vulnerable to automation, and 40% across the U.S. McKinsey thinks it's about 800 million globally. Well, COVID has brought all that fast forward, hasn't it?
Yes.
The job, when you look at who's losing jobs, at least in this country, the first ones are restaurants, retail, some goods movement, warehousing, those lower skilled jobs. And there are millions and millions and millions of those folks that are just out of work right now, and they may or may not get back. And so it's brought all that front and center. And I'm not 100% sure that by the way, in the US, the official unemployment rate's about 14%. Everybody thinks it's really about 24% when it comes out again. Yeah. And right before this, we were probably at 4%. So from 4 to 24% in a couple of months, and I don't think, we're coming back to that for a long time. I think there's going to be a base level of unemployment of around, my guess, and I'm not getting calls from Wall Street Journal asking me what those are, but it's roughly, I think it's going to be about 10%, because there are a lot of people that are displaced that would have been displaced in the next 5 years, no matter what, okay, because of automation and so forth, that are not going to get back in the job force without significant retraining. And I hate that word. I think it's more than retraining, but nonetheless, there's that kind of thing. And so to me, coming back to your point, this presents a real opportunity for local officials, local government, state governments. And the question becomes, we know we're all anxious to rebuild. Okay? We're all anxious to get to whatever post-COVID-19 looks like. But the question is, are we going to rebuild what we had, or are we going to rebuild what we need? That's a big difference, right? And I'm a believer that an economy needs to be based on innovation in order to have the longevity and the ability to persevere in these kinds of disruptions. And the reason of that is when you talk about what innovation is, I don't think of innovation just as technology, although that's kind of where I've been for the vast majority of my career. I think of innovation as creating new things, whether it's a new business model or a new idea or approaching something in a different manner. It's the creation of new things that generates growth, and it generates value-added jobs, and value-added jobs tend to get paid more than non-value. They tend to be able to, and just on and on and on. We came across an interesting number not that long ago. I don't know, I'm probably going into too much detail in the economic development thing. We'll get into something funner. But when people talk about economic development, the key metric is job creation. Okay? That's number one. And all net new jobs in the US in the last 5 years have been created by companies of less than 5 years old. Think about that. Because those are the, okay. So, and if you create a job, let's say we're lucky in our community and we secure a new Home Depot. That's a big chain out here. And that Home Depot hires 10 people. Those 10 direct hires then have an impact on the community called indirect job creation, because we go out to restaurants or we buy something in the store or whatever, and those are indirect jobs. And so a normal Home Depot kind of a job creates 1-to-1. So 10 direct jobs will, over a period of time, create 10 indirect jobs. In the technology world, those 10 jobs will create 50. It's a
Right.
5-to-1
Right.
leverage. So that's the real kind of financial money type of leverage that technology economy can have.
Yes, I suppose my observation on innovation, it's sort of, to me, it's lost its currency in a lot of ways because it's just such an overused word, and everybody's got the innovation in their title. And, we see a lot of, I mentor and advise a number of early stage companies, and I prefer to call them early stage companies because I hate this startup sort of party popper thing. Again, I think that's lost its currency. And we've seen a lot of them that have, pivoted very successfully in this time. But I also see that a lot of people that have in the past loved to talk about innovation. It's like there's innovation and there's innovation, how do we, in Australia, we talk about innovation, that we're an innovative nation and all the rest of it. But if you look at any report around innovation in the world, you'll see that we sit around 70 to 80 consistently across the World Economic Forum report, the innovation reports that come out globally. So it seems to me that on the surface, we talk about it a lot superficially, but when it actually comes to moving the needle in innovation, we're pretty poor at it.
Well, that challenge of, people really watering down what the innovation thought is, okay? And that can be applied to incubators, accelerators, is a problem everywhere. But, to me, Lee, it always comes down to, a lot of people can talk. Can you walk the walk? That's the real deal. Okay.
Yeah.
And when you walk the walk, it's pretty apparent because it's different, and when you are different, you have a risk, but you also have the possibility of doing something really unique and interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the challenge for all government officials these days, is to figure out how to be innovative and to walk that walk. Not only, and this is, part of developing an innovation-driven economy is making it a place that is hospitable to early stage companies in an ecosystem that supports that. But the other part is being an innovative government, trying new things, having a environment where it's okay to try things that may not work because they're new. My favorite all-time quote is from Thomas Edison, very famous inventor. And he said something along the lines of, I haven't failed, I've just tried 20,000 things that haven't worked. Is that not great? I mean, it really is a terrific, thought. Okay. And so to me, innovation has a lot to do with getting up every morning and trying to figure out how to do your job or the task better. Literally, that's what it means.
Yeah. So I'm interested on your thoughts on ecosystem, because again, I think we hear about ecosystem all the time, overused buzzword. And I see some ecosystems that actually just get on with building. And, I've been, really privileged to have been able to travel around the world and visit a lot of these ecosystems and interview a lot of the people within those ecosystems. And it's really clear to me that some are very effective and working, and others are having lots of beers and Friday pizza nights. What's your view on that?
Well, first of all, let me tell you, I've been doing this for about 9 years. In 2011, summer of 2011, I got a call. I was in Bogota and riding my motorcycle around South America, and I got a call asking me to come back and to start the Los Angeles Cleantech Incubator for the mayor. And so I did, okay? And we started in a garage, a bus repair garage. That's, about the size of my house now. And over a period of time, we built that incubator from 3,000 square feet in a bus repair garage to 50,000 square feet, Taj Mahal Clean Tech. Most importantly, we created $625 million worth of long-term economic value for the city of Los Angeles. And so I've learned the things that my point of view is simply learned from being in the trenches. I didn't start out by saying, boy, what I want to be is somebody who builds ecosystems. That's not it. It's now I believe that it's really a benefit to an entire community. Some of the things we learned in terms of an ecosystem is that there are roughly 7 important components of an ecosystem, all of which need to work together. Okay? So those 7 components are leadership. I'm a believer that things start from the top. I've heard a lot of arguments and cases that things bubble up. May be true, but in politics and policy, generally speaking, if the top person sets the direction, things happen. And so in policy leadership and so forth, the leader of a region needs to make economic development the center of their strategy for innovation and innovation reverse. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second part is that you have to have and you have to fuel sources of innovation. Those are, of course, research labs and universities and so forth, and corporations and garages. But the real trick here is, universities' research labs are great at research and science, but they're not so great at connecting them to markets and making businesses out of them. And most, not all, okay, I'm not painting a brush on all, okay, but most are more concerned with licensing that technology and patenting it than making a business out of it. So the first part of an ecosystem needs to have bridges from its sources of innovation into commercialization engines, which are incubators, accelerators, programs that are aimed at driving and helping entrepreneurs on a very practical level. I didn't, we're not a business school. That's not the deal. Yeah. We are very practical. What are the nuts and how do you evaluate a term sheet? You're looking for an investment and somebody's giving you a term sheet. The first time I saw a term sheet was when one was pushed across the table from me. I didn't know what to do. I wish now I would have done something a little different. How do you form a board of directors? How do you get to market? All these kinds of fairly practical things by people who have actually done it, okay, is probably the most important component. Then that needs to be connected to sources of funding. I have the opportunity of talking and meeting with people all around the world, cities, and they continuously ask me, well, how can we get somebody from Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, which is where all of the VCs are, most of them are on one road called Sand Hill Road. How can we get them on an airplane and fly to us? And the fact is, it's not happening. That's not ever going to happen. You're going to have to figure out how to, roll your own, and then connecting that to talent, connecting that to marketplaces, and having a network that puts all of this together, a full-time network whose job it is to make these pieces work together. So we have a point of view on what it takes to build an ecosystem. Each is different, of course, but we have some hard-learned principles.
So I think that your experience, and it's a great story about the LA Cleantech Incubator, and the fact that you started in a bus garage, a mechanic shop, and I've seen some photos of it. Actually, I think it was a fold-up card table and a couple of outdoor camping chairs.
Yeah.
So, but what I find, and again, this is probably an Australian perspective, is the first port of call is that we tend to, lease 600 square meters of floor space, or spend $5 million renovating a building, and and then we cut a ribbon, and a lot of those places. Someone said to me once that some of these sort of startup hubs, is like putting someone with no money and no idea next to someone else with no money and no idea.
Well, that might be a little cruel, but I get
think
the
it
point.
is, but the point, right?
Well, we were very fortunate because when we started LACI, we had this horrible building that could not be the attraction.
Yeah.
And the attraction had to be programmed. It forced us to really focus on programming and helping entrepreneurs. And I am so glad that we were forced to do that, because over the period, it took us 5 years to open up to get it funded and open up this 60,000 square foot facility. During those 5 years, we learned what to do. We built an ecosystem. We had companies, and so when we moved into this, we filled it up like that. Okay?
Yeah.
And we kind of knew what we needed. Now, the place part of these innovation hubs are important in terms of atmosphere. I mean, who wants to work in what in our country we call Class A office space, which is high rise and kind of traditional? Nobody really wants to do that. And clean tech entrepreneurs need, sometimes they need, because they build products and bend metal, we need prototyping shops, we need chemistry labs and so forth and so on. So it's a little different kind of thing. But I always urge folks, because I understand what you're saying, and it's true from almost everybody I talk to. They always want to build something first. And my recommendation is build the program first. Do it as quickly, get in any kind of space that you can get into quickly, okay? And I hope, the funkier the space, the better,
Yeah.
and get to developing a program and helping entrepreneurs on a day-to-day basis. And that, I think, will then drive this. I know if this thing will be successful, that's going to drive its success. And then, and it's reasonable to have ribbon cutting ceremonies. When we first started in that bus repair garage, I think we started in June and we had our official grand opening in October. Well, it was in the parking lot in the back, okay? The mayor of Los Angeles came. Okay? And he, his, entourage pulls up and he gets out and he looks around and says, "Well, Fred, I thought there's only going to be 20 people here." And we had 200, 300 people in that parking lot. Right. And we were really proud because we had 2 companies that had joined us, and we put those folks on stage. And, you can make an event and a ribbon cutting out of every important milestone. And I think it's important to mark that, because that's the way you can gather folks and show success. People like things that succeed. They want to be part of that. Just human nature. And,
yeah.
So you have to spend some time.
So I think there's some great parallels between your experience with the clean energy and the work that we're trying to do here at the moment with Fire Tech Connect around fire technologies. And 2 of the areas that I think we've sort of identified that stand out after doing, pretty extensive, research and talking to a lot of people is that both the companies need to have, as you say, the program and the people wrapped around them, right? So the space is nice to have, but it's the programs and the people, the 2 Ps. And if we can get that right and help them commercialize, and then the other side is the adoption from the marketplace. It's like there's a sort of almost a requirement for demand generation. So there's, what I would say is sort of a bureaucratic inertia that we're been doing it this way. And we're going to continue to do it this way because it's not broke in their view. So, from your experience in the clean energy sector, you would have had a similar experience, I would imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and first of all, back then, which seems like ancient history, even though it's not years, okay.
Back then.
Clean tech had just gone through a really bad thing in 2008, 2009, no investors wanted to touch it, right? Nobody really understood it was and nobody really understood that if you built if you built companies, that would generate jobs. Most people thought job creation was a new football stadium. That's job creation. Okay. So nobody really understood what we were doing. And I spent literally, I counted it up once because, you have to order business cards. Okay. I went through 1,500 business cards in the first year. Now, and if you do the math, that's 4 or 5 cards a day, every day. Well, why? Well, because I wanted to get the entire community, in this instance, Los Angeles' innovation community, to be aware of us so that we could attract companies and people that were interested. But we wanted general support as well of stakeholders and people who are interested to build this ecosystem, to get them excited about what we were doing. And, you know, we were greeted with, you know, not everybody thought this was a great idea.
Right.
You know, there's just like, you know, probably a lot of people who don't think, you know, fire tech is a great idea. But coming back to what I said in terms of walking the walk and talking the talk, once we started to achieve some success, then we got people to listen. More and more people started to participate and join in. And so it's always, from my perspective, about performance. You know, somebody once said, I had two pieces of good career advice. Don't confuse efforts with results. You know, it's a very good point, right? It's and one of the guys I work with said, you know, if you don't come in Saturday, don't bother coming in Sunday. You know, so it kind of it's about performance. It's about making it happen. And I'm a big believer that that the public and private side together, it is very possible and in fact necessary to work together. And most of the people I meet in the public arena are really bright people. They're really committed. You know, they want to do something that's really important and better. And they're there not because they want to make a lot of money. If they wanted to make a lot of money, they would have gone someplace else, right? It's not that money isn't important, but you know, their motivation is something different. So what they have to, their charge, of course, is to figure out how to maneuver through the bureaucracy to get something done faster, cheaper, better. That's their challenge. Right?
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting thing.
So, you know, again, back in Australia, we're heavily reliant on coal. I mean, $48 billion, I think, in exports a year. I don't think there's any doubt that our parliament, particularly our Liberal Party, which is our right, is, you know, stacked with, you know, mining organisations and receiving funding from those organisations. So it's frustrating from that perspective. And, you know, I mean, look, I've always been, I suppose, on the leaning on the Liberal side, but I find myself ever increasingly frustrated with that lack of how do we move the needle and this denial that climate change has anything to do with our catastrophic bushfires and that, and you know, that clean technology is all a farce and, you know.
Well, you know, first of all, it's really important to know that we're talking about transition. You're not the only country that is dependent upon fossil fuels for energy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we are. That's why we're, and that you can't ignore that. There are very few green fields left. You know, we have to understand where we are, and we have to move and transition as fast as we possibly can. I believe that money talks, and I think the reason we should do that, and the reason why in our country it's neither Republican or Democrat, it's about business. There's a huge business opportunity in front of us. I think the fastest growing business sectors for the last 5 years have been in sustainable technologies. And it's hard to measure sustainable stuff because it's in everything. But if you use the proxy of solar and wind, they're growing 25% a year, every year. And so it's a huge, it will get bigger and there's a real opportunity. And that tends to move people forward. And at some stage of the game, even if you have a coal field in your backyard, there will be a price competitiveness of sustainable sources of of energy that will compete in eventually over time. And maybe never will it ever go to zero. But I think that we can make really good progress in that. And I think it's a transition. And you know, it's going to take a while.
It's going to take
a long time. It took a long time to build it. You know, I mean, we went through the industrial age through fossil technology, and it built wonderful things for all of us. Now we have to transition off of it. You know, nobody wants to do what this is. You know, nobody wants to go through something like this again. nobody wants to go through an economy that's shut down. Nobody's suggesting, and that would happen if you turn off the energy switch, it all stops, right? So
Yeah.
nobody's suggesting that we want to get rid of totally tomorrow all of our sources of fossil fuel generated energy. What we are saying is we need to make really rapid progress in having a plan to transition and to drive down costs, because it's always about money. The sooner that, and I think now in levelized costs, I think probably solar and wind are more than competitive to coal. But once you have that money sunk in coal and you have it coming, it's hard to walk away from it, right?
Yeah.
But it will happen. There's no question in my mind. It is happening.
Yes, it will happen. I suppose the whole thing in Australia with our COVID experience is that, you know, our three biggest economic drivers is our mining industry, obviously, and you know, a second and third place is our tourism industry and our education exports with our universities, particularly to our Asian and our, you know, Chinese students that come here to study. Obviously, now we've shut our international borders. There's $40 billion plus that evaporates from that tourism industry. Our international tourists and our universities have been struggling for some time. But we have seen this move into this e-learning. You know, you and I back in the day in the .com period, where we were all talking about we were all going to be in video conferences and we were going to be online learning and we were going to be you know, buying things online. That was in 98, exactly. 99, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it gets here, yeah.
20 years later, we're still, you know, before the virus experience, obviously we were still just slowly growing that, yeah, but it wasn't exponential. We're now in that some of those things are exponential. How does it impact the education system?
Well, a very good friend of mine is a high school teacher in a little community in California called San Marino. So he's been a high school teacher for 20 or 30 years. But he's one of the leading proponents of using technology and innovation, thinking differently on how to teach his kids. And he was scared because, as you probably can guess, all schools closed down in LA, probably 2 months ago, a month and a half ago. Yep. And yet there was a mandate that came out, you know, you're going to teach online. Right? Yeah. And he was scared about it, but I mean, he was excited, but he was scared. And now he doesn't want to go back because there's certain kinds of feedback mechanisms in this that aren't that don't happen as directly, if you can believe that, in the classroom. And so he gets immediate feedback in terms of, you know, emails, likes, dislikes, all kinds of digital interaction and feedback that we're used to. So I think that while I don't think we're going to stay 100% online learning, I think once again it's going to be a big piece that stays around.
Yeah, and I think you know, from our perspective in Australia, we've closed our borders, so a lot of our international students, you know, and it makes me wonder, you know, is there any way that we can start to really adopt the idea of e-learning and distance learning, and how do we do that and move away from this sandstone sort of campus and sandstone buildings? And
well, you know, take the Network for Global Innovation, my organization. It's a global company. That's what we're all about. We have, you know, close to 30 members in 14 countries, and we were always. Now we're still a global company, but we travel and interact like we're doing right now, and you know, we're doing just fine.
Yeah, I think everyone is adopting in their own way, and you know, you see some industries like, you know, Instacart and Amazon and Netflix. I mean, they're booming, and then obviously, you know, industries and sectors like the airline and tourism industry are you know, brought to their knees. I think that's one area, you know, the travel industry, you know, what does that rebound like? What does that look like? How's the airline and the idea of the infrastructure we've built around supporting that international travel and those airlines look like?
I guess I'm relatively optimistic about that. first of all, I do a lot of travel. I like it. I've been,
Yeah.
But I think that there's people just like for us in 9/11. Okay, people thought that our world was going to end. Literally, my brother called me up and said, "This is it. We're done." And I said, "No, they just knocked down a couple of buildings. It's not done yet."
Yeah.
And how did that impact travel? Well, it made our life more of a pain. I mean, all the security stuff and we locked down our cabins more and so forth. But travel business is bigger today than it was then. Same thing will happen here. We will figure out how to make our airports and our planes and our hotels not only clean, they're probably clean now, but making them evident to their customers that they're clean and they're safe. And as soon as that happens, I think and it may involve some higher costs in the short term. I mean, there may not, oh, I'm really going to be sorry to lose that center seat, but there may be that kind of impact, right? Less volume. Yeah. But I think
that's probably one of the good things to come out of that.
Yeah, really. I kind of, our president, got elected. Part of the reason why he got elected was this slogan, "Make America Great Again," which was essentially nationalistic. Focus on the U.S. and and make sure we're good. And I'm a globalist. I think that we are a global economy. We touch each other. We know each other. We fight among each other. But one of the reasons why it's not so easy to hit the button and blow something up is chances are that thing you're blowing up is going to impact you personally on a financial basis, right? We're all connected,
Yeah.
And I think that people want to be connected. And when we started the engine, and we started it as part of LACI, as an initiative of LACI, about 4 years ago, I asked people, well, why did you want to become part of this? And there were some specific things, and then it always came down to this innate feeling that they wanted to be connected to the world. They wanted to know what's going on. And I think today, for lots of reasons, that's not going away. It's maybe even more important. So I think the travel business, while it will be different in many ways, there are new opportunities there as well. I mean, who would have thought, I don't know how many years ago, when Airbnb came on board? Did that not change everything? Some of which was very good, some of which was not, okay?
Yeah.
There will be more of that. There just will be. Because people will see opportunities and markets will change.
Yeah.
From that part, I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. That's good to hear an optimistic perspective on that. Like you, I travel a lot and I love traveling. So I'd hate to have that, as not as part of our life. And I think like you, when I travel and meet people, there's this sense of everybody is part of a global community. And I think in a strange sort of way, the idea that we've all had to, connect like this through Zoom has almost, removed those borders even more.
No, I really believe that. I think that it's made reaching out and having conversations with people much easier. When, I don't know, a number of years back, like all successful entrepreneurs, especially all successful entrepreneurs from, California, I thought, I was an arrogant son of a bitch. And I thought that was the only place really good ideas can come from, and if you're in Northern California, of course, that's the only place.
Yeah.
And part of my work at LACI and setting an engine up, I ended up having to go around the world looking for entrepreneurs and looking for, incubators. And guess what? Every place I went to, literally every place, Ethiopia, the most developing of developing countries, okay? Kazakhstan, Pakistan, they all had wonderful entrepreneurs, young people that were excited, were trying to build companies, were trying to, and generally speaking, the companies they were trying to do would probably help solve their country's problems. They were all terrific. But what they didn't have was support.
Right.
That's the big missing factor. And so I'm very, very positive about if we can somehow unleash the entrepreneurial spirit in these things and help these young entrepreneurs, no matter what your form of government is, okay? But if you can release these young entrepreneurs and help them and give them what I call the innovation infrastructure, then I think we have a chance of not only solving climate change, which I think is the only way to solve it, is getting entrepreneurial and innovation all around the world, not just porting it from the West Coast or Boston to the rest of the world. I think we have a real chance of withstanding these kinds of things that happen now and saving the planet.
Fred, I think that's a fantastic note to finish on. It's been an absolute privilege to be able to speak with you this morning. I could continue talking forever. Yeah. So perhaps we can have another chat down the track as well. Yeah,
good. I've enjoyed it, and good luck. And I'm sure we'll see each other.
We will. Thanks very much, Fred.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.